Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, Sexton, S-E-X-T-O-N. I'm the Benton County Prosecuting Attorney.
So can you start by kind of walking us through your rendition of what has taken place here?
So far today we have had bond hearings on 4 other individuals who we believe are involved with this particular crime. My expectation is we'll have another couple of bond hearings tomorrow. And I tend to believe that we'll be in a better position to kind of figure out where we are on future investigation after that. The matter is still under investigation. The Rogers Police Department have done a lot of work over and above to make sure that suspects were identified, leads were run down, and that we got good basis for making our charging decisions as quickly as we did.
Yeah, so there's 10 people now. Are all 10 of these people juveniles at this time?
No, it's actually a mix of both. If I remember correctly, out of the ones that we've got right now, we've got 5 juvenile suspects. They have been filed as, let me make sure I've got that right, sorry, before I break off. Let's see what we had. Yes, that's right. 5 juvenile, I'll restart so maybe y'all can cut something out of this. It's actually a mix of both. We've got 5 juvenile suspects who were heard in Division 3. That's normal procedurally on a case like this because the state can make a decision to file an adult charge. However, that charge has to be filed initially in juvenile court before the state files an information. And that's one of the reasons why, if you notice the differences between the case files right now, you see an information filed in those cases. The state has the obligation to file the criminal adult information in those cases before the judge can give those cases an adult felony division date. The other remaining defendants were adult cases. They were provided regular bond hearings and a court date in the division that the cases will be lodged in.
So that's 10 people at this time, but are you guys expecting that number is going to keep going up?
I think officers are still handling the investigation. I feel relatively sure that we are getting to kind of the end of this. However, work is still being done even as I speak. Officers are still working up caseload, are still working through evidence, are still gathering information and statements. So I can't say 100% sure, but I do feel like the work they've done so far is getting us to a point where we're going to have kind of the end of this initial phase of the investigation.
Yeah, and kind of walk us through what those people are being charged with and why. The information so far, especially on the juvenile cases, we have charged them with capital murder based on the levels of participation change. However, the state feels strongly that there's enough there to charge each one of them under capital murder based on the evidence that we have before us. That being said, the adult cases have not had a formal filing of an information in those. What we'll be doing is what we normally do in an adult case. Officers, because they're still working on the investigation, are still gathering evidence for us. And once we get the initial reports in, we'll sit down, we'll review those cases, make a formal filing decision. I feel pretty strongly right now it'll be pretty close to what the probable cause affidavits are alleging. However, we have to keep an open mind, making sure that we're not missing anything in the files and in the investigation, and ensure that we're not necessarily missing a charge that needs to be either added on or a charge that needs to be taken off because we don't have sufficient evidence. I'm not worried about that right now, but it's important for us to view the whole of the investigation. And of course, we haven't seen much of anything besides that press release that Rogers Police sent out to us. Are you able to share what you guys think might have happened here?
Ethically, I am kind of constrained right now as we speak because the investigation is one that's still of an ongoing nature. That may change in the future, and we'll be able to provide more information. I know that's a concern among the public to make sure that they understand for their own safety exactly what's going on. At some point, I feel like we'll be able to discuss it a little more broadly. Now, that being said, there are serious charges. The state will have to be careful with what information it releases to ensure that our defendants are getting a fair trial in Benton County.
We do feel based on the charges that this has to do with gang violence, correct, or no?
At this point, I can't necessarily confirm nor deny that particular issue. However, I think in upcoming days we will be able to provide a little more detail regarding that.
And with so many children, people under 18 being charged, is that concerning to you? You know, where did these kids go to school?
It's deeply concerning to me. I can't necessarily get into a lot. I mean, we're still gathering up that type of information as well, and there are some variations. Some of them, I believe, are locals, and then some of them, I believe, some of these defendants are actually from Washington County. So we're working with our partners both in Benton County and Washington County to gather up information so we can kind of get a feel for those particular issues. That being said, this gun crime in general in the county, we've had a disturbing pattern of having younger and younger defendants who are involved with gunplay in the county. And that goes beyond just this case. We've had several cases that our office has prosecuted where we've had to make an early decision to charge a juvenile as an adult. And some of those decisions are a lot younger, are juveniles who are age-wise a lot younger than what we're normally used to charging on these cases. It is enough of a disturbing trend where we're going to be working closely with our law enforcement agencies and our law enforcement partners to, one, identify measures that we are going to be doing and we can address to hopefully prevent these issues in the future. We're going to be working with our juvenile courts to see what we can do to identify things that might help change this. But overall, as a prosecuting attorney's office, it's a disturbing enough trend where we're going to continue to be aggressive in these particular cases. And part of that aggressive decision is when we make the decision to file adult cases. That's not something that we make, we have to make it quickly under the state laws because the juvenile shouldn't necessarily be in doubt on where his case is going at the first appearance in juvenile court. But that being said, we're going to continue to press those cases forward. The allegations that we've been dealing with on a regular basis involving juvenile gunplay have been serious enough where we feel like we honestly don't have a choice in some of these cases. They need to be treated as adults. But the trend is there. It's really bothersome for me as a resident of Benton County, and we're going to do what we can to identify strategies that will deal with this and to prosecute offenders.
So you're saying when this case comes to your desk, you have discretion whether or not to charge them as an adult, and you chose
That's correct.
to do so?
That's correct. The state, depending on the age of the juvenile, juveniles who are 16 or 17, if they commit a felony crime, they're subject to, at that point, being filed as adult. Now, we don't do that with every single crime, and usually it is more serious types of crime that will trigger us to filing an adult charge. Occasionally, it's based on the fact that the juvenile is about to turn 18, and the juvenile system will not be able to provide services enough to redirect them, and therefore, we're much better off filing as an adult file. With younger juveniles, there is a band of cases, we call it a laundry list in law school, but there is a very narrow band of cases that we can file on, and they tend to be the most serious offenses. The problem that we're seeing is a lot of those most serious offenses are being arrested in our county, and that is a disturbing trend.
Yeah, and so with, 10 people firing shots at one person, you don't know who really fired the killing shot. So will each of them be tried for that capital murder and likely be charged with that?
We feel strongly that we're going to have enough evidence to go forward with the evidence presented and the current status of the case law.
Any questions?
Yeah, just kind of some housekeeping things, and you'll just keep looking at her.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, and so just for some people that may not be familiar, can you just kind of define capital murder and kind of what that entails?
Capital murder in the state of Arkansas is the only crime that is subject to punishment by the death penalty under the current laws of the state. It usually requires the state not only to show either there's a laundry list of types of murder. I know that sounds odd for an attorney to say, but when I say this, that some murders are different than others, they are based on the fact that there is a band of situations that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt to fit into capital murder. The classic example of that's murder by premeditation. But that doesn't necessarily completely trigger the death penalty unless the state can prove an aggravating factor that's listed by the statutes of the state of Arkansas beyond a reasonable doubt. At that point, the state can pursue the death penalty, but there'll be some other limits in this case as well. Constitutionally, there's some limits that the state has on requesting the death penalty for juveniles. There's some limits on on recommending life without parole on juveniles. So there's going to be a lot of calculations when we're working on this case on what we can, what we can't do. There'll be a lot of work that we do with both the victim's family and with our law enforcement agencies in discussing what our options are. And then there's going to be some complications in the case because the juveniles will be subject to potential juvenile transfer hearings. That will allow the juvenile to request the court to consider sending the case back down to juvenile. Just because the prosecutor files adult does not necessarily mean it stays as adult. And therefore we'll have to go through hearings on those matters as well.
Right, and you were kind of talking about the process of charging adult versus juvenile. You said there was that laundry list of crimes that are kind of under consideration. Can you kind of walk through kind of the thought process in this particular case between charging some of the juveniles as an adult?
Usually they're some of the more serious violent crimes that we have. Capital murder is at the top of that list, and because capital murder is the most serious crime that you can commit in the state of Arkansas, that usually triggers one, notice for us that it needs to be reviewed for an adult recommendation, and notice for us that we need to make a pretty fast decision based on the fact that they are juveniles. It's a rarity for us to get something like this coming in with juveniles of this age, but considering the allegations involved, we felt like that was important enough for us to make the decision now to move these cases toward adult. Like I said before, that's not necessarily a final determinative matter. When the prosecutor does that on a case file, it's still subject to court review.
And just housekeeping things, I know you said there were some that were involved in the case that may be from Washington County. Are they all from the state of Arkansas? Are there any that aren't United States citizens, just from what y'all found kind of to this point?
The case is new enough right now that I'm not aware of citizenship issues at this point. Part of it is we'll still have to go through some additional booking procedures with, we have to do full standard booking procedures with a juvenile once we file as an adult. That will give us a better sense of that. I'm not 100% sure what those issues are going to be, but at this point, our bigger concern and our bigger focus is ensuring that we get justice for our victim and our next of kin, and that's going to be the pole star that we follow from this point.
And then just kind of at this point, is there any ongoing threat, or is there any potential for future violence kind of in the people or maybe affiliated people around this case? Is there any ongoing threat the public needs to be aware about?
At this point, I know Rogers Police Department is doing extra work to make sure the public remains safe. They're doing extra work to ensure that if there is issues that we do address them as quickly as possible. I am unaware at this point of any issues that are specific that I can talk about. But honestly, the usual rule of thumb for folks is important. If you see something that you feel like is not on the up and up, there's nothing wrong with you picking up a phone and calling the non-emergency number of your local police department and asking them to take a look at it too.
Then,
I'm good.
is there anything else kind of that we didn't touch on that you think is important for people to know?
Nothing that comes directly to mind. I'm sure we're going to have some further information as time goes on.
Yeah. All right. Perfect.